Welcome to another episode of the Paradigm 132 podcast. I'm your humble and gracious host, Rashad Horn. Got my little shirt on. It was made. We get some more made. Might get some hoodies and stuff too. But on today's episode, I want to talk about a tweet that I came across by way of a hashtag that I follow on Instagram. So the tweet was tweeted by a woman named Bree Newsom Bass. And this is the tweet. It says the pandemic is setting an entire generation of students back educationally. I know I keep saying it, but the long-term impacts of the failed pandemic response will permanently alter the trajectory of USA versus nations that properly responded. This is the decline of the USA. Now, the person that reposted it, they, left it open. What are your thoughts? What are your comments? Do you agree? Do you disagree? So when I initially came across the tweet, I was like, you know what? I don't really want to comment. I do have a opinion on the situation, but I don't really feel like going back and forth because, certain subjects, you can kind of look at the subjects, you can kind of see, okay, well, this is gonna gain some traction, right? So I was like, I don't really want to discuss it. I don't really want to get involved in it. But the more I sat on it, the more I pondered it, and I said, this is a classic case of the glass half full versus the glass half empty. Now, in reality, both are the same thing, right? The glass is half full or the glass is half empty in reality. But when we talk about certain things like this, we're basing these particular things on context. So in the context of it all, it's not the same thing, right? So when I look at a potential tweet like that and the verbiage that was used that this is the decline of America, I have to stop and I have to think, for a second, because I'm not the most intellectual person in the world, but I pride myself on reading and understanding, specific things. And what I looked at it as is that when you have pandemics, you have, outbreaks of certain things like this, it really shows that what we have here in America is the class issue, right? And when I say that, I'm speaking in terms of if you're in the upper class, you have children and stuff like that, I don't feel like the pandemic has affected you the way that it's affected middle class and lower class children. Because for not all intents and purposes, but for most intents and purposes, what you have in these particular situations is you have a situation in which upper class children, they're still going to be able to have the advantage that they've always had from an educational standpoint. They benefit, obviously, from being in private school and having a smaller classroom size, which I feel like is one of the things that needs to be discussed more when we're talking about children left behind academically, right? So if they had access to a tutor and stuff like that, they already have the internet. So in the event that the tutor still has the ability to see them via Zoom and things like that, then they can still get their coursework completed. When we drop down to the middle class and things like that, now we got the upper middle class and we got the lower middle class, right? So upper middle class, they may have some of the same advantages as some of the upper class have as it pertains to making sure that their child is still able to adequately do their assignments and things like that. And then when we get to the lower middle class, you may have somewhat of a drop off because some of the lower middle class people may have been in the job loss category, or maybe they had to work from home and things of that particular nature. So you have those particular things that at play. And obviously what you have at the lower classes, you already have issues that were already pre-existing issues, and now they're just being more publicized. The analogy that I use for this is like, just say for instance, you have a flashlight, right? And let's say you walk into like an abandoned warehouse, right? And so like you got the flashlight, obviously you're looking ahead. So you hear something to the left. So you shine the flashlight over there. You don't see anything. You hear something to the right, shining over there. Don't see anything, shining in the air. Up there, you don't see anything. Something behind you, you shine it. You don't see anything, right? But what the pandemic has done is not keep you with the flashlight. It's not giving you the ability to say, you know what, hey, just go flip the light switch. We can see everything. So that's what the pandemic has done. The pandemic has allowed for America as well as Americans to flip the light switch, and now we can look at every single thing that's wrong with the education system. I've read a multitude of articles about children in rural areas not having access to high-speed internet, which again was an issue prior. Obviously, we have the extent to which black children, due to the reports that black people are more prone to have underlying conditions and be more susceptible to contracting COVID. Now you have parents that are stating that, you know what, I don't want my children to go back to school. I know I was reading an article right here in Mississippi where the Oxford School District, they gave parents the option of whether or not they wanted to subject their children back to in-person learning. And most black parents opted not to have their children back in-face learning because they didn't feel that the school district was going to do everything in its power to make sure that their children were going to be safe at school and they wouldn't contract anything to bring it back home to their relatives. Now, again, these are issues that we already know about, right? These are issues that we already know about. But again, like I say, when you turn the light on, you're able to see everything. And so now people have to somewhat address them, right? So I feel like that's why it was so much of a push to get children to go back to school so that we can turn the light back off, and the couple of people with the flashlight, you can go back in here with the flashlight, and we're like, look, we don't see it. You're shining the flashlight. The sound is over here. It's like, okay, shine the flashlight over there. I don't see anything, right? But when the light is out, when the light is on, you have to see every single thing. You don't get to pick and choose what it is that you want to do. So getting back to the tweet, I don't look at this as the decline of the USA as it pertains to other countries, right? I don't look at it from that particular standpoint, because one of the things that I think that no one can look at or overlook, for lack of better terms, is the innovation that people are trying to do. Now, one of the things, even when we talked about the lack of internet, I did see where they, in certain areas where they would have a school bus and it would be equipped with Wi-Fi, and children could come to that particular area and have Wi-Fi and they could utilize it to do their schoolwork, right? So it's making people utilize their mind, and you having to think, okay, well, how can I educate somebody, right? It's also giving individuals more so of a look at things to say, you know what? I didn't seriously think about homeschooling my child in the past, but now with the current and the way things are, this might be an option. My wife has a friend that she went to school with, and that's what her and her husband are doing. They got a whole lunch menu. They had a syllabus and all that good stuff like that. They had the coursework and all that stuff like that. And so that's one of the things that you have to look at, because there are people who successfully homeschool their children and their children are not socially awkward, right? So to me, something like this, it only will set a generation back if people continue to have the same mindset that they had pre-pandemic, post, and during the pandemic. Now, again, I've come across my fair share of articles. I saw one in particular that the pandemic has set children, black children back, I believe blacks and Latinos back 4 to 5 months in math, right? So the interesting thing about that to me is when we talk about math, because I want to get off on a tangent about math, is that even before the pandemic, blacks and Latinos were suffering from math problems. And that's one of the things that I ponder about. I did an interview with a an author on one of my previous podcasts, Nicholas Battle, and he is really good at math. And that was one of the questions that I asked him. Why do we have a problem with math, right? And so I was talking to my mom about it, and I formulated my own conclusion. I said math, unlike any other subject, is a subject in which, because obviously we know that for all intents and purposes, school is basically memorization, right? If you can memorize the material enough to pass the test, you no longer have to go back to it. But math principles that you learn in first and second grade, those principles still need to be able to be utilized in 11th and 12th grade once you get to higher level maths. So I told my mom, I said, I think it was probably around the 5th grade. I believe it was the last time I had like a B in math, right? It was like the last time I had a B. Once I got to 6th grade and on, it was just C's. And I remember it was senior year. The first 9 weeks we had a teacher, and I just couldn't grasp her teaching method. So luckily she got pregnant, and the second 9 weeks, obviously she took a maternal leave, so they brought in another teacher, and I did fantastic. I did fantastic in her course. And then my first year of college, due to my lackluster math score on the ACT, I had to take remedial algebra in junior college. And what was so interesting about the remedial algebra part was that I did so well, right? Like, it wasn't like the college professor was explaining this stuff any better. It was just like at that particular time, it was like, man, like I can understand it so much better. And so it stuck with me. It was like, man, you know what? Maybe I could have been good at math, right? But it was just like, once you get to a certain age, it's like, I don't care about math. Even though math is something that's a part of your everyday life, it was one of those things where it was like, I just didn't, I wasn't too concerned about it. So to get back on topic, again, these are things that have already been discussed ad nauseum before. And I feel like before we can say that an entire generation is going to be set back due to a pandemic, I really feel like we have to really stop and we have to think about the past generations and the multitude of children that have already been left behind prior to the pandemic, right? I don't know this woman. I just saw the tweet. I went to her Instagram page. I see that she's accomplished with Black Lives Matter things. She has awards and things of that particular nature. But I just feel like that making a statement as profound as that, I feel like it doesn't address the issues that already happened. Because I feel like that even if the pandemic response had been on time, because you have some people that felt like it was too late. You got some people that feel like it was right on time. And you got some people that feel like it was too early. So you're not going to satisfy everyone's appetite for a pandemic response, right? But when we're talking about something like this, even if you responded to the pandemic on time, that doesn't stop the miseducation of when we look at the numbers of blacks and Hispanics in public school, right? It doesn't change that. it doesn't change the metrics and the numbers that African American students aren't necessarily in large numbers attracted to higher math and higher sciences, right? So when we look at that particular aspect in that of itself, pandemic excluded, we cannot truthfully think that certain things are going to change without addressing issues that were already issued before the pandemic, right? So the issue of blacks and Hispanics not majoring in mathematics in a high number, that's going to be an issue because that basically sets the precedent to say that, look, this is the direction that things are going, and you're not participating in it for whatever particular reason, and it has nothing to do with something that's innate. I do not feel like blacks and Hispanics are predisposed to perform poorly in mathematics. A lot of this stuff has to do with societal norms, right? And what is deemed to be acceptable. So I wrote down two particular notes, right? So one, it says that now reading is the basic of life, right? If you can't read proficiently to a certain extent, then you're I'm not gonna say you're ultimately doomed, but it does kind of put you in a box, especially nowadays, right? So I had heard for a while that where like the saying was like over half of Americans have a second grade reading level, right? And some people may say, well, a reading level isn't necessarily that big of an issue due to the fact that a lot of times you're around people, you're around particular things where the working vocabulary isn't so profound to the point that they're talking over your head. And while that may be true, but I do feel like that it does play a larger role when you start moving up the ladder, because you're going to need to understand certain technical jargon, right? So this is a report from 2017, 3 years before COVID. A 2017 report showed that 18%, and these are African Americans, right? Showed that 18% of 8th grade students read at a proficient level. Let me read that again. Let me get my Umar Johnson on. Let me say it again. 2017 report showed that only 18% of African American 8th graders read at a proficient level. That means it's 82% that do not read at a proficient level. Okay. A 2015 report showed that only 17% of high school African American seniors read at a proficient level, while nearly half of white high school seniors read at that level. Talk about setting a generation back, right? Talk about setting a generation back. So again, we have to ask the question, the light is on right now. The light is on in the warehouse. What policies and what things are going to be in place to move forward? Because when I look at policies and things of that particular nature, I kind of look at it like if a person has the option to drive to school, or a person has the right to drive, or a person has the right to ride a bicycle, right? You have that right to go somewhere. But if you opt not to use either one, even though that it's allowed for you to do it, and nothing helps or changes in your life, well, what more do you want them to do? Do you want them to come pick you up and take you everywhere? Like, what do you want? So, when I look at stuff like that, man, it's troubling because, again, there's a major problem going on. And I feel like that, similar to the George Floyd situation, where you were actually able to see the police officer kneeling on his neck and actually watch him die on television, it flipped the light on. So things happen. But what we do realize is that things try to get back to normal so that you can overlook these particular different things. So again, I asked the question, even if you had proper COVID response, those numbers weren't changing. So sometimes it's kind of like the old saying that once the rain goes, the sun comes out, right? And so this is why I'm saying I'm looking at this as a glass half full moment, because this gives people the ability to look at things and say, you know what, maybe we need to change the way we're doing things, right? I know I always see the meme where it's like, schools need to teach children about taxes and schools need to teach children about this and schools need to do this. But I see guys who don't have a teaching certification, point blank, period. But they can talk about taxes. They can talk about estate planning. They can talk about all these particular different things like this. So they open up an avenue, they open up a lane for them. And I see a lot of people that are changing their mindset and saying, you know what, I don't want to continue to move like this. I want to really learn things because I don't want to be bogged down and having my mental capacity bogged down with things that are not actually tangible or going to help me move forward. So that's why I say when you tweet something like that, it's so profound. And again, I don't know if there's any underlying shots being taken. Some people may say, well, you're utilizing the COVID thing as a slight to the former president, right? So, but I'm not here to cast that aspersion. Some people may would, but I'm just looking at it from the standpoint that, like, it's giving more people the ability to take control of things in their particular life and not sit back and say, you know what, I'm going to wait for this. Because, again, just the last part of this will permanently alter the trajectory of the USA versus nations that properly responded. This is the decline of the USA. Again, I feel like that you're counting people short, right? You're counting people short, right? And again, like I said, I'm not here to attack this particular person by any stretch of the imagination. That's not what I'm here to do. But I'm just, you put something out in the atmosphere, and I was able to visually look at it and go through it and just realize that, like, hey, this is regardless of the COVID response. These are issues that we already had. I went through a little trial. I'll say a little study that I did. And I just pulled up some HBCUs. And then I pulled up just like some random, not Ivy League school, but just like some random, like what we would deem white universities. And they have a tab where you can click on and you can look at the percentage in which something was majored in, right? So when I looked at the HBCUs, and this is no knock to HBCUs, again, like I say, I'm not encompassing anybody in anything. I'm just looking at the percentages. I'm looking at the data that was collected and given out about the schools. When I looked at HBCUs, technical fields such as finance, such as mathematics, major sciences, as a percentage of majors amongst the student populations, they ranked amongst the bottom. Excuse me. They ranked amongst the bottom as a percentage. When I went to the white institutes, it was an absolute role reversal. Those fields ranked at the top as the highest percentage, right? And again, this isn't, so again, when you say you're setting the whole generation back, there's already things that have already been in place prior to this that are already setting people back, right? And I do not feel that something like this is going to change the trajectory of the USA. The trajectory is what the trajectory is going to be, right? So the fact that they were able to, and whether you trust it or not, right? The fact that they were able to, as they say, Operation Warp Speed, to come up with a vaccine in a shorter amount of time than any other vaccine has been manufactured. You again, like I say, regardless of your thought process about it, that shows that there are individuals still on this soil that are going to make sure that they are not taking a back seat to anybody. Now, obviously, of course, there are other studies out, again, prior to COVID, that stated that other countries, students, they were like China is churning out more engineers on average than Americans, right? So again, like I said, all of these particular things are pre-COVID. So it doesn't matter, again, like I say, the response. If you're not doing a due diligence in school to major in these particular different things, then those particular things are going to change trajectory regardless. So one of those particular things is kind of like if you have a leaking pipe and you never fix it, and the pipe just continues to leak and 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 leak. And then you may have a hard freeze or something comes. And then like it breaks the pipe. And so it gives you the ability, even though you knew that the pipe was leaking, you knew it was leaking. He was like, well, it's leaking, it'll be all right. But when you have the hard freeze, it may give someone the leeway to say, well, it was because of the hard freeze. That's why my pipe burst. That's why I got $2,000 to $4,000 worth of damage. That's why I have it, because the hard freeze. When in actuality, you saw it leaking, you knew it was leaking, and you chose not to address the leak. And so again, going back to my analogy, you walk into the big warehouse, you got the flashlight, you got someone behind you that can alleviate the issues, and you say, well, it's an issue over there, and they're looking like, I don't see anything. Well, there's an issue over there. I don't see anything, right? So it's only when you turn the light on that you realize it. So now the light is on. Excuse me again. The light is on, and now individuals want to, say this, right? So, what are your thoughts, on the issue? Do any of you feel like that there's a lot of things that we can blame on COVID, like again, like I say, you got some people that feel like it was too fast, and some people that feel like it was too late, got some people that feel like it was right on time. But if you're a person that feel like the COVID response was too late, do you feel that education is one of the things that COVID has hindered or is going to hinder to the point that we're going to fall to the wayside by whether it's China, whether it's India or something like that? Or are you under the thought process like me that said, look, all this stuff was already happening and people need to make a concerted effort moving forward to try to rectify certain issues, right? But that's my thoughts on the situation. Again, like I said, I went to the woman's page. Like she's doing good work, so I commend her for the work that she does. I just felt like this particular tweet, I felt like that, and again, like I said, maybe if it gets to a situation where I could dialogue with this particular person, then maybe I could get a full understanding of the extent of the tweet. But I'm just looking at it from the extent that I have to the point that you say, look, we can't blame COVID for this. You know, it's already, the trajectory is already is there that America is going to be passed in the future. It's already there. I don't feel like this expedited anything because at the end of the day, it was already a low number of people in certain fields as it is. So the talent isn't there, which is why I feel like some of these major corporations are talking about, like Google saying like, hey, we're going to hire interns. We don't want you to go to college. We're going to bring you right in because we don't feel like college is teaching you what you need to be taught anyway. And ultimately, we already see that the reports show that the public school system is not doing the job the way that it needs to be doing. So you have all those particular things at play, and I just can't fathom, blaming COVID or late COVID response for the eventual trajectory of decline of America when things have already been set into motion for many years prior to 2019, 2020 that have already pretty much set up the trajectory of where America is going. So, leave your thoughts below. Like and subscribe. And again, like I say, if you prefer to listen to it on your DSP, it's still available on your DSP. And back to you again this week. Peace.